Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Madeline Kleinschmidt, and I am the CHCI Bank of America Public Policy Fellow. As the daughter of immigrant parents from Venezuela and small business owners, I am delighted to welcome you all to this morning's breakout session entitled Closing the Latino Labor Market Gap. First, on behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Delta Airlines, Pearson Education, McKinsey & Company, Microsoft, Prudential Financial for their generous support of this session. In this session, we will look at how Latinos account for 1 out of every 3 workers by 2060. Latinos continue to show great potential for significant professional advancements in the American workforce, particularly in high-wage earning professions. However, economic instability, pay gaps, ethnic or racial discrimination, and lack of educational access and professional networks continue to present obstacles for Latino communities in the workforce. We will hear from a panel of distinguished experts who are tackling this very issue. But before we jump right into the discussion, it is now my honor to introduce the session chair for this panel, Mayor Eric Adams. Mayor Eric Leroy Adams is an American politician and former law enforcement officer, serving as the 110th mayor of New York City since January 1st, 2022. He gave voice to a diverse coalition of working families in all 5 boroughs and is leading the fight to bring back New York City's economy, reduce inequality, improve public safety, and build a stronger, healthier city that delivers for all New Yorkers. Please welcome Mayor Eric Adams.
So I apologize, everyone. The mayor is, we heard last that he's running late. So if he does join us, we will have him jump in the middle of the session, but we will actually move on to the next part. I apologize for that. But thank you for introducing him. Hopefully he joins us later on.
Okay. So then up next, we will be hearing from our sponsor speaker remarks provided by Juanita Velez, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for Delta Airlines. Juanita Velez, please come up and welcome.
Buenos dias. On behalf of Delta Airlines, I'm honored and humbled to share the stage with such impactful leaders that are leading the change in the intentional approach to economic opportunity and access to our Latino community. Thank you to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute and the members of the Hispanic Caucus for continuing to propel our Latino community by providing opportunities for Latinas like myself. Delta has long been a purpose-driven brand, and our mission is to not only connect, but to reflect the world that we live in. As such, we are steadfast in our commitment to actively seeking diversity, boldly pursuing equity, and consciously promoting inclusion, supporting organizations like the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And today's important dialogue aligns with many purpose-driven brands and missions. In fact, as I stand here today, you or many of you have probably shared the story of my immigrant journey. I came to Atlanta on the first day of the '96 Olympics, fleeing from the Colombian drug war. My parents left behind their entire lives and professions to ensure that my brother and I had a better shot in a country where access met opportunity and education met liberation. I cleaned houses and corporate offices with my mom, while my dad worked as a busman in a bar. Wiping down those glassy corner corporate offices made me believe that I had hope to one day put up a family portrait and call it my own. Today, I am a proud member of the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team at Delta Airlines, where my role as DE&I manager is to bring to life the DE&I mission of Delta Airlines. We call our team the Justice League because our work is not only hard work, but it's heart work. H-E-A-R-T. My work influences and impacts over 75,000 Delta employees, 11% of whom are Latino. At Delta, we're focused on closing that gap, ensuring that corporate representation matches our frontline representation. Across the three main pillars, Latinos, Black talent, and women, we have initiated a transparent and accountable Close the Gap report. We've reimagined our talent strategy to ensure that there is more opportunities created for underrepresented groups. We've removed four-year degree colleges from 90% of our job requirements. We're emphasizing a skills-first approach in hiring, and we've actually set on to take the aggressive goal, long-term and game-changing, of filling 25% of our corporate and management jobs with frontline talent. We've also accelerated our inclusion training, and we've implemented a diverse hiring practice to mitigate bias in the hiring process. We've created apprenticeship programs to foster new developments and various career paths for our frontline talent. We know that the path to a more equitable and just company is a journey, but we're so excited because we're seeing the fruits of the direction that we're moving into, and we're motivated to continue the work. I look forward to today's discussion and resulting actionable outcomes that some of us, our companies, and our industries can continue to take forward in order for us to continue to increase Latino representation in corporate America, as well as in high-wage earning positions. Muchísimas gracias.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Juanita, for your dedication and work to the diversity, equity, and inclusion field. Now, let's begin our conversation. To facilitate this panel, we are delighted to have Russell Contreras as our moderator for this session. Russell Contreras is the Justice and Race reporter at Axios, covering the policies and agencies at the heart of the administration of justice and how it impacts people of color. Please welcome our moderator, Russell Contreras.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for your patience this morning and for the long line. As you know, the vice president was here. You may have had to turn in your mace. You may have had to turn in your keys with a little knife on the end. I had to actually put in my green chili from New Mexico that I was going to bring my boss. The Secret Service like, ¿Qué es eso? What is this? It's a green chili. What do you use it for? Eat. And why is it frozen? Because you got to. But now we're here, so I'm really excited for the topic we're having today. We're going to talk about Latinos, workers, and labor, something we all are involved in and know relatively something. Everybody, it hits us all to the core because we can't eat green chili without jobs. So thank you, Madeline, and thank you, CHCI, for hosting this event. Today, we're going to be hearing from panelists as they discuss the current state of Latino workers in the United States and the bold initiatives being undertaken to close the Latino labor market gap and build a pipeline of Latino labor leaders across sectors in the workplace. I'm delighted to be joined with three experts on this topic. During our discussion today, we'll be taking questions. We have a mic right there. And we asked you, just think about questions you have that you can ask us here that you will not have an opportunity elsewhere. We also ask you to follow the discussion and spread the word on social media using the hashtag CHCIHHM22. Again, that's CHCIHHM22. There's no X. So before we get started, I want to introduce our panelist, our esteemed panelist here today. Immediately to my left is Leti Gasca. She leads the customer insight team at Vatam in the Americas. She holds an MS in Human Capital Analytics and Technology by NYU, where she was recognized with the Academic Excellence Award and the Leadership Award. She's been awarded by the Economist magazine as one of the voices from 2040. So yes, we're still going to be around in 2040. To her left is the wonderful Lucy Perez. She's a senior partner at McKinsey & Company, the Boston office, where she advises CEOs and teams at leadership pharma, biotech, life science companies globally on growth strategies, innovation, sustainability, organizational transformation. A former cancer researcher at Memorial Sloan, she also brings a strong technological background in her work with organizations across the healthcare sector. To her left is Ren Hayat. He is the head of economics and global markets at LinkedIn. He's also a faculty member at Harvard University, where he teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in economics. He has an extensive experience in advising governments and sovereign entities on the complex financial and economic matters, including debt restructuring. So we have a wonderful panelist here. But before I get into my questions, I'm going to ask each panelist to talk about the company and the work they do and why this panel is important to them. I'll start with you, Leti.
Awesome, thank you so much. Buenos días a todos. As mentioned, I am part of the FADEM team in the Americas. FADEM is part of the Pearson Education Group. Probably you're familiar with Pearson. Probably you have Pearson textbooks. And now we are really reinventing how we think about education, the future of education, the future of work, and we're having a data-based approach. I am part of the Workforce Skills Division, which is a division focused on finding innovative solutions to support the workforce across all the stages of their journey. And happy to share more about what we have learned in the next few minutes. Happy to be here.
Lucy?
Sure, Russell. Thank you for having me on the panel and to the organizers for the opportunity to be here. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart and to us at McKinsey. We're a global management consulting firm, and we partner with our clients to accelerate sustainable and inclusive growth. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is that imperative that these three words need to go hand in hand: sustainable and inclusive and growth. And obviously, when we're having the conversations with our clients, whether they're in the private, public, or social sector, a conversation in the United States about sustainable and inclusive growth has to be a conversation about Latinos. And this is why we invest so deeply in the research around understanding the Latino wealth creation journey. What does it take to drive Latino economic mobility? I am very proud to be the sponsor of that research initiative within McKinsey. I also have responsibility for our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. As part of doing that, it's not only the work that we do directly with our clients in our day-to-day work, but other efforts that we put in place to help train Latino executives across the industries. And so I look forward to sharing with you a little bit about our Latino Leadership Academy, which to date has already had 6,500 Latino executives participating from over 800 organizations. Because at the end of the day, if we get this right, this is about creating a stronger economy for all of us. So really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Russell. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Rand Gayad. Very honored to be here today. I think this is a very important topic. It isn't really getting enough attention. We at LinkedIn actually are doing a lot of work behind, this topic is a key pillar behind a lot of the work that we're doing. So for most of you, I'm hoping everybody here is on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn basically, LinkedIn's vision as a company is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And we do this by working with data that our members provide to us. So they provide to us data from what skills they have, what levels of education they've undertaken, what kind of jobs they've been performing. And we use this data in order to put together insights about key trends on the labor market. So what's really happening to hiring, skill acquisition, migration, et cetera. And we believe through these insights, we're actually helping and adding to the capacity of policymakers in order to better understand the key challenges that they're facing in the local labor markets. And we'll talk a little bit more about how sort of some of the initiatives we're now involved in at LinkedIn has implications on the Latino workforce in particular. So again, very happy to be here today. I think this is a great topic.
So in a couple of weeks, the organization Latitude will be releasing a report about Latino buying power. Last year, the buying power, according to its analytics, was about the same of the country of France. This is Latino buying power. But yet at the same time, Latinos are underpaid more than $250 billion yearly than non-Hispanic whites. And that wage gap, of course, stifles business innovation, growth, job creation for a number of Latinos across the country. And I'm in New Mexico, which is one of the poorest states in the country. It's also the most Hispanic state in the country. So, Leti, I'll start with you. Why is it critical to have a conversation about how to close this Latino labor market gap?
Well, to get started, because we are talking about work, and work is a big topic. If you think about it, we adults spend 1/3 of our adult life working, 1/3. And this activity, and work is not only about earning money. Work is also about identity, community, mental health, and so much more. And this activity where we invest so much time, money, energy is being rapidly transformed by many forces. And the truth is that not everyone is prepared for this rapid transformation. What is driving this transformation that some people even call the fourth industrial revolution? For instance, technologies such as AI and robotics. Also, the pandemic changed how we work. Demographic changes, migration, even climate change is rapidly changing how we work. And we need to make sure that Latinos are prepared for this massive transformation in the way we work. As we know, Latinos usually are paid less for the same jobs as non-Hispanic whites. And given the size of the size of the challenge, and given how big Latino is, really, as Lucy was saying, this is not a Latino issue. This is an American imperative. Thank you.
Lucy, and on that note, one of the things that you're really concerned about is stability. And this Latino wage gap creates instability, right? What's at stake here if we do not address this instability and this growing gap?
So when we were looking at the Latino wealth creation journey, it takes looking not just at the worker role that Latinos may play in society, but it's thinking about the role of how they're spending money, how they're acting as consumers you were referring to earlier. Similarly, how they're saving. Ultimately, when you look at the average wealth of a Latino family, it's in the order of a fifth of that of the average white family in the US. That is primarily driven because of that wage gap that we're talking about. And so that's the criticality. For that ability to create, generate, transmit that wealth from one generation to another, getting that wage gap right is absolutely essential. Because this is what then enables these Latinos to invest in their families, in their communities, further in the economy and growing a stronger economy. So that is part of why getting this right and understanding, is this gap being driven because of representation? We know that we have an overrepresentation of Latinos on lower paying jobs, right? They may be concentrated in geographies where those wages are also lower. So getting the reskilling right, helping move those Latinos to better paying jobs with better benefits is part of creating that stronger wealth creation journey.
Rand, I've always wanted to ask someone from LinkedIn this, is when you go to LinkedIn, and I know you've done this, and you start seeing your peers who have the same job skills as you, the way they're articulating their job skills, you want to step your game up. Because I'll see another reporter, I'm like, oh, that reporter is way less experienced. But the way they craft their narrative on LinkedIn is like beautiful, right? So then it makes me want to step up here. Does LinkedIn provide a space to help close this gap? Basically, giving us the confidence to say what our skills are.
Absolutely. So let me start, Russell, maybe to say a few things about how we at LinkedIn see things from our own lens. I'll say a few things about the labor market in general, and also how that implicates basically Latino workforce. And I'll talk more about how we can actually help increase mobility. So the first thing I think everybody sort of agrees today, the narrative about labor markets is that workers are somehow enjoying some of the lowest unemployment rates of all time. So in the United States today, we have almost 2 job openings for every single unemployed individual, something that we haven't really seen for quite some time. And this is basically a great indication that we have a very, very solid labor market, even though we have started to hear lately that the economy has started to sort of slow down compared to the trend of last year. So in general, the labor market is very strong, and that's our view at LinkedIn. Now, the problem is when you start looking at the disaggregated data, so this very high level view is very positive and promising, but once you start looking at the disaggregated data, you see a very bleak reality of inequality. So unfortunately, for example, for Latino workers, you see that labor market conditions continue to lag behind their non-Hispanic counterparts. And this has been the case for, I think, since the Bureau of Labor Statistics started publishing data on employment by ethnicity. So it's a very long trend, and Latino workers continue to lag behind their counterparts, even though today we have one of the tightest labor markets ever. So usually you would expect when the labor market is tight, everybody has an equal chance of finding a job, but that's really not the case, unfortunately. So to your question, LinkedIn actually provides a platform, and through this platform, we're trying to emphasize a couple of key initiatives. One of them, I think what Letty brought up, actually I think it was Juanita, the idea of sort of changing the narrative about how we want to hire and source and moving towards a skill-based approach. This is what we think is going to be the priority. This is what we think is going to be the future. And this is how we can actually move Latino workforce, Latinos into the labor force and increase their economic mobility. And we'll talk more about some of
Sure. I'm gonna stick with you, Ren, because I want you to provide us a kind of a brief detail of the micro or the macro conditions from your own lens. That is, what does the data tell you about the status of the labor market, and what does it mean when it comes to Latinos? You talked a little bit about the low unemployment rate, but what else is the data telling us?
So as I said, like at a very aggregate level, things are still very positive in the labor market. It's still a very solid labor market. Hiring has sort of declined a little bit, but things continue to be very tight. Employers are still looking to find workers. There's not enough workers for jobs today in every single industry. But what's really more important, one key data point that we're currently tracking at LinkedIn that has to do with skills-based hiring is that we're seeing up to 40% of companies on LinkedIn today using skills to actually look for talent. This is something that is somehow surprising and promising, because we are seeing a lot of evidence that companies are moving away from this old traditional model of hiring that specifically looks for candidates based on whether they have 4 years degree or not, and moving towards this new model where what we care about is what skills you have rather than where you got your skills from. 45%, and it continues to increase. And I think, like I said earlier, this is where we're heading. We're heading to a future where skills count more and more, and education somehow is not the best indicator or signal for whether a Latino worker or any other worker is actually capable of doing his or her job.
One thing that I may add here, Russell, is one of the interesting findings from our research as we were looking at Latino both workers and entrepreneurs is that this is a community that tends to rely much more heavily on friends and family for counseling, for investment, and for advancement, right? And so that is one of the areas of opportunity where, for example, platforms like LinkedIn and others, how you leverage professional societies, groups like this one, really become key around this opportunity to leaning more into those as a way to, for example, accessing capital or creating the right connections that can create the opportunity to that next job.
And Letty, you and I were talking before the panel. As I was mentioning, I'm from New Mexico, and one of the highest paying jobs you can get in New Mexico is working in the oil and gas industry. It can pay you with no college education or some, $90,000 to $120,000 a year. In the transition over to clean energy, those jobs are at risk. But those workers, a lot of them are Raza, a lot of them are Mexicano, a lot of them are Central American. There's no job. If their job ends Friday, there's no job for them to go to Monday. There's wind turbines, but they apply just a fraction of what oil and gas does. And the highest paying job, or the one the most stable, is the dude who goes around the wind turbines to pick up dead birds, $15 an hour. So Letty, you have data on this though, that shows this transition to clean energy jobs is not as clear cut and is more complicated. Tell us what you see.
Yeah, this is a big topic now for us at Fathom by Pearson. We follow the approach everyone has mentioned. Everyone is thinking about skills, how to use skills to understand where you need to be in the future, what are the skills of the future, what are the skills that you have now, and also the skills hiring trend. What we have done is a skills adjacency analysis to understand how to reskill individuals in the oil and gas industry into the clean energy industry. Surprisingly, for many roles, there are very similar skills, contexts of work, ways of working, similar knowledge, and you can actually transition individuals successfully in a few months from one of these jobs in oil and industry to a clean industry job if you provide the right training, the right upskilling, reskilling. How to do it? We need to use predictive analytics. We need to use data science to really understand what are those skills and what is the most efficient way to close these gaps. And the news is that many times the best way, the most efficient way to close these gaps is not through traditional education. What we were saying, the solution is in really innovative ways to provide education. Maybe it's in the job training, maybe it's through a credentialing strategy where currently one of the solutions from the Workforce Skills Division has shed a lot of light. And I hope that this brings some light into how we can really transition individuals who could potentially lose their jobs. And we can also talk about how to transition people who could be automated by technology, but that's a different topic.
We love our cars, especially our trucks and our fossil fuel cars. But if anybody invents a lowrider EV, I'm giving you my money right away, right? I would love to have that. So by 2060, Latinos will be 1 in every 3 workers in the United States. That's 1 in every 3. And there are many factors why there continues to be obstacles and challenges today. And we anticipate possibly those same challenges in the future. So Lucy, I'll go with you. What are some of those most pressing that we know, those obstacles that exist today that we need to tackle? So by the time we're at 2060, we can earn what we deserve.
So lots of obstacles to tackle, but again, the reminder is what a great opportunity this is, right? If we get this right, we're talking about adding more than $2 trillion to our economy. What are some of those challenges, Russell, that you raise? First and foremost is getting the Latino worker to those better paying jobs, right? One, creating the awareness of what are those jobs? What are the skills required for those jobs? What are the mechanisms to acquire the skills for those jobs? There's a question around access to capital. So many of Latinos are entrepreneurs, are creating businesses themselves, being employers of others. And yet, the majority of these entrepreneurs are, again, only relying on their own savings, those of friends and family, and really have a hard time scaling their businesses, creating those opportunities, again, for more jobs to provide better services to all of us. So figuring out how to do that reskilling, how to identify the jobs, how to compensate, in a way that frankly brings more benefits to many of these jobs. Today, about 45% of Latinos do not get health benefits through their employer or the union that they may belong to. For example, I spend a lot of time in the healthcare sector, means that they're not necessarily tapping into preventive care. That down the line means they're spending more of that hard-earned cash in things that they may have been able to put towards other use.
Ran in the future, it was movement of labor trying to connect employers with workers that was a problem, especially for Latinos in rural areas. That has almost been eliminated now, but there's still other obstacles. You there, LinkedIn, what are some of the things you guys are anticipating that needs to be tackled by 2060?
Well, let me first start from where we are right now, basically with the pandemic, and how the pandemic sort of changed things for Latinos, and how this will have impact basically on the next couple of decades, maybe. So, I mean, if there's one thing that I can think of about that is positive about the pandemic is that it has changed the way we hire, we recruit, we interview people, and we've started to see, like both of my colleagues said, a movement away from this old traditional method of hiring that is based strictly on 4 years degree towards a skills-based approach. What is important, as I mentioned earlier, in addition to the fact that 45% of companies on LinkedIn are today looking for talent based on skills, what's important is they realizing that this is actually working out much better than how it used to happen in the past. So your perfect worker is out there, but you may have actually overlooked the person just because you've relied on some sort of a traditional 4 years degree. We sort of track this in our data, and we realized basically that all these people who are basically skilled but do not have degrees, but what we call them at LinkedIn, the skilled through alternative routes, the STAR or the STARS, these are a massive pool of talent. So we're talking about, in the United States, there's 70 million STARS, 70 people who are skilled through alternative routes. These are folks who actually got their skills from previous jobs, from community colleges, from military school, or maybe from other less traditional routes. They are basically a massive pool of talent. And Latinos, they make up 18% of this pool. So we're talking about 13.5 million or 14 million Latino STARS. These are people, as Lucy had mentioned, have been overlooked, concentrated in low-wage jobs, and somehow are finding it very difficult to transition to higher-wage jobs. So what can LinkedIn do? What we are doing is exactly what Letty had originally highlighted, is highlighting the kind of skills that these folks can use in other higher-paying jobs. So we're actually tracking skills, and we're finding that a lot of the low-wage jobs provide skills that allow you to actually move to higher-paid jobs, and we're trying to highlight these for Latino workforce so they can actually move to higher brackets, income brackets, find better jobs, and also sort of reduce this gap, whether it's a wage gap or unemployment gap.
And Letty, you mentioned something good that you got the data and this transformation we're having. Of course, this digital transformation, AI, robotics, our phones are coming up. There's new technology. The new iPhone comes out this Friday. I hope you got yours. I got mine. But how has this impacted Latinos? Because AI comes with a set of skills that you need to know to code it, to market it, to understand it. And if we're not careful, the technology we create could be reflective of our racism today, because there's people creating it. So what's at stake here to get Latinos into that transition, the digital transformation, getting involved in AI? And what does the data tell us?
Yeah. In Fathom, we analyze two main impacts of technology in work. One is automation, the other one is augmentation. Automation, very easy to get, technology replacing work. Augmentation is technology enhancing work, making work more productive. In 2021, we did an analysis to understand how different types of robotics and AI can impact different ethnicities. And what we find is that, guess what? The two ethnicities that could potentially be more replaced, more automated by technology by 2030 are Black Americans and Latinos. In the case of Latinos, let's start with the females. 40% of work done by Latinas can be replaced by technology in the next 8 years. I'm going to say it again. This is very relevant. 40% of the work, we call it task time, done by Latinas, can be replaced by automating technologies in the next 8 years. In the case of Latinos, 30%. This is massive, and this has massive implications in terms of education, how we implement technology, how we plan for the future. Having said that, this is not related with the fact of being Latino. This is really related with the type of work that Latinos tend to occupy, that, as we know, are jobs that are often dangerous, are manual, repetitive. And actually, if we look at the top 20 most popular jobs across the US where Latinos are working today, literally all of them are jobs that are manual, repetitive, and often dangerous. 60% of drywall installers, which is a very dangerous work, are Latinos. This means that we really need to start working on how to use skill similarity, this new vision around skills, how to hire, how to train people, to prepare all of these individuals who are at risk of being replaced by technology. There is a lot we can do. There are good news. I know that what I just said sounds a bit like, ooh, super pessimistic, what is going to happen in the next 8 years. I want to close this part with a positive note. There is a lot we can do. There are many innovative ways to provide skills to individuals. One great example is Pearson's GED. There is a program built to provide, it's for those individuals who don't have a high school diploma. It has already provided millions of Americans, many of them Latinos, with a credential that works as a high school diploma and that can really enhance their career prospects. Thank you.
Lucy, I was, a couple of weeks ago, was in Aspen, Colorado. And many people think it's a white ski resort, and it is, but the surrounding towns are Latino. And for years, they've been trying to get Latinos elected to office. But it wasn't until recently that when Latinas started running, they started winning. They won school board seats, county commissioner seats. And there's a Latina running for a state office up there, for state legislator, who is a Latina firefighter, just getting all this excitement. So, of course, I've heard the cliche before, the future is Latina, but here it is. In corporate America, if we're really going to advance, Latinos are earning degrees at a higher rate than Latinos. But how are we doing in corporate America? How are Latinas there? What does that space look like right now?
Thank you for that question, Russell. He knows that this is a topic that really gets me engaged. So Latinas in corporate America, it's something that we at McKinsey had been looking at for several years now. We have this partnership with Lean In, looking at women in the workplace, right? And as part of that, really trying to understand how are Latinas doing, what's getting in the way of their advancement and progression to the corporate executive suites. Because unfortunately, those numbers in the C-suite are extremely low, right? We're talking about the single digits, I think many of us know very well. And what we found is, on one hand, being optimistic, right? There's been some good progress made. As we look at what is critical in that advancement is understanding that movement from that entry-level job to that first manager position. And we often talk about that being the broken rung. because for every 100 men that make it through that rung, not so broken for them, for Latinas, we're talking about only 86 Latinas making that promotion. I'm saying this is, we have some positive news to share. This was the data for 2020. When we looked at the data for 2019, that number was only 71. So I take some, solace in the fact that, as more organizations are putting attention to this, right, recognizing the value of diverse teams. And there's lots of data around how this helps organizations make better decisions, design better products that meet the needs of customers much better. There's indeed more attention and focus being put in. But what are some of the challenges, right? What is contributing to that? Some of that is connecting and looking at what are those criteria for promotion. And one of the things that, I will share this anecdotally that we often find is that Latinos can look at a job description, right, and say, like, I must absolutely hit every single requirement on that job description to raise my hand for that promotion. But we know that others don't do that. That's more like inspiration, right, and saying, like, I hit 3, I'm going to go for it. And this is where having those strong networks at work and outside of work to create the encouragement and the ability to understand the opportunities and how to go after it becomes so important. I'm sure my fellow panelists have some takes on this question as well.
Rand, also, I'd ask you about mobility. What are employees doing in this new mobile world, work from home? What can employees do to continue this increased mobility to improve the labor market? Because we still have a chance here. There is still this push by some employers to get back to the office, but mobility still has its place here. What's going on?
Sure, that's a great question. I think I would define mobility in a bunch of different ways, but for me, increasing mobility for Latino workers means moving them to higher wages, or basically jobs that pay higher wages, and allowing them to get an equal opportunity of finding a job, just like any other individual in the United States. So I think we have a unique opportunity today to make this happen. The pandemic has accelerated the process for us, and I think there are 3 things I can think of today that employers can do to help Latino workers transition back to better jobs and better opportunities. The first one, which I think we all agree on here, is make skills-first hiring or skills-based hiring the new norm. Screening applicants based on the skills that they have is going to be extremely important to increase equity in the labor force. And that's key. And that's basically, there's anecdotal evidence and a lot of support to the idea that hiring people based on skills is turning out to be actually much better. They're staying longer on the job, there's less turnover, and employers are finding that these folks are doing a much better job, they're more productive. So that's number one. Number two is make general educational development and certification programs available to Latinos and to anybody in general. And that's going back to Letty's point. I think one of the key problem or the key hurdle in your introduction also, Russell, is the fact that there's lack of enough, in addition to discrimination, a majority of the Latino workers do not have a college degree. So by allowing them to get some sort of certifications, either from Pearson or from LinkedIn Learning, I think employers can open a lot of doors for Latino workers to help them actually transition and highlight to future employers that they're capable of doing the job. That's number two. And third, and I'll stop, is we need to, of course, increase our, improve or increase on the way we source talent. So we need to start considering less traditional applicants, people that we've never thought about before, like people from military backgrounds, from community colleges, and other non-traditional routes. And we need, most importantly, to recognize that low wage does not equate or does not mean low skilled. Latino workers who are on low-wage occupations, either because of discrimination or because they don't have educational degree, does not mean they don't have skills. Their skills definitely can allow them to transition to higher and better paid jobs. So those are three key things for the future, and I think a lot of employers are basically being more engaged into each of them.
We'd like to ask the audience to, if you have a question, please come to the mic there. We have about 5 minutes for questions. We are innovative because, real quickly, a good friend of mine who grew up in Spanish Harlem told me in the riots of '77, when the lights went out, everybody was breaking windows and stealing jewelry. but there was one guy who was stealing all the Pampers in El Barrio. And so after the lights went on, nobody could sell TVs or gold, whatever, but everybody need Pampers. So he made a killing. He had it like 6 months here, 12 months here. And it was innovative. And I asked what this guy's name is, because this is an entrepreneur. Had he been given the opportunity, he saw a market. And it became out of oppression and discrimination, but it was great. And I always wanted to know if anybody ever could find this guy who was the pamper entrepreneur. I'd love to interview him if he's still alive. So, your question.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jose Miranda. I'm with the Association of Community College Trustees. Thank you for the shout out, by the way. And one theme that I heard a lot over the course of the discussion was this idea of skills-based hiring. Community colleges are very familiar with that. We've been at the forefront of skills-based training. And so I just had a question to you all into how do we loop in those innovative alternative education, or, I mean, the skills have to be either trained or reskilled, or certified in some way. So how do we bring into the table the non-traditional 4-year sector, like community colleges or CT centers, to ensure that industries, employers are partnering with them to emphasize that need of skills for the workforce? Sorry.
Lucy, I know this is something that you're really strong about.
I think that the three of us have something. I'm happy to get started because actually I have some great stories to share on that space. Some of our clients are actually higher ed institutions that want to look at what the data is telling us about where the future is going. And it's really interesting to see every time more and more higher ed institutions coming and approaching FADEM asking like, please, I need a way to find out if I am training for jobs that will not be relevant in the future. Are we still training for skills that will be replaced by technology? What are the jobs for the future? What is going to happen in the main industries across my region? What are the skills that will be more relevant in 5 years in my state? These are type of questions that we can answer using FADEM, and many higher ed institutions are taking very brave decisions and retiring programs that are not relevant anymore for the demographics they serve. And they are also thinking outside of the box and building like very specific credentialing opportunities, specific reskilling opportunities, for instance, to upskill accountants, that as we know is one of the jobs that will be more impacted by automating technologies, into cybersecurity roles, which are jobs that have a lot of future, that will always be needed, and that have better future prospects in general. I hope this helps.
Perfect answer.
Great conversation. I'm not sure if this is working or not, but Helen Torres, Executive Director and CEO of HOPE, Hispanas Organized for Political Equality. We're a leadership organization on behalf of Latinas. So we just conducted a study with University of Southern California with their Dr. Manuel Pastor and their Equality Racial Institute. And our study found that regardless of education and skills, the Latina pay gap was true regardless of that. So even if you have a bachelor's degree and it's in computer science, you're still making close to $10 less than your counterparts. And you approach the word very quickly, discrimination. How are we really truly rooting out discrimination regardless of the skills, regardless of the education? We know it's real and it's keeping us behind.
Did you want to start? Go ahead. It is a question that comes up a lot, and thank you for raising it. When we were taking a look at understanding that wage gap that exists across industries, there's so many factors that play in, right? And it's hard to tease out which one is the most important. But what we find in our work with clients is that it really comes down to first making sure you need to have the right data. So it's like, how are you looking at your data and understanding? How are you recruiting, right? Very importantly, how are people advancing in the organization, right? And understanding, are there differences in that advancement in how we're paying folks? Are those differences tied to where that person is based, something about their job description, so that you can begin to tease that out. And so, I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Letty has been saying. We now find ourselves in a world with so much more data that really allows us to improve the analytics that we're doing and to make those much more objective-based decisions that need to go hand in hand with training, right? A lot more training around unconscious and conscious bias is happening across organizations. And I think that's something that becomes incredibly important to really role modeled at all levels of the organization, from the most senior executives down to your frontline workers. And so that's another place where we've just been seeing a lot more investment from organizations, recognizing that indeed we still have a gap that needs to be closed.
Romana?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. My claim to fame is I am a recent college graduate. I'm very proud of that. I went to Columbia University, and I only got through it because on campus we had this group called Casa Latina. So important. And this question is really for Lucy and Rand on industries that are really hard to break through. It wasn't until I was a junior in college that I even heard of the term case interview, which is a common interview in management consulting. So automatically, everyone in Casa Latina just thought, how would we break through? You know, how are we even going to compete with other students who have either had parents who helped them with these interviews or even just knew what they were? So what is the best way you've seen tactically for young Latino professionals to break into really difficult industries like management consulting? I mean, especially McKinsey, or even tech like LinkedIn. A couple years out of school, have you seen the best tactic be through organizations like Alpha or CHCI, or have you seen more tactical success with like internal programs at either of your companies?
Well, first off, congratulations, and thank you for the question, because you're exactly like the kind of talent we get excited about recruiting. Like, we've been talking, Rand made the reference to like diversifying our recruiting sources. That is something that has been front and center for us for many years now, because I mean, if we're doing the research, recognizing the value of diverse teams, we are out there, you know, trying to bring in the best diverse talent into the organization. What is the kind of advice? You may have heard me mention quite a bit the importance of the networks and connecting, right? And so that is incredibly important, taking advantage of the opportunities available at the school, but even beyond the school. Most organizations are also investing quite heavily in internship programs and all kinds of learning opportunities to open the doors, to explain for us. I mean, I will tell you, my parents still have a hard time understanding or describing my job. What does a management consultant do, right? And so the importance of connecting, right? Raising awareness, asking for help. Building those connections, it is absolutely essential. As you're building the skills, right, recognizing what are those skills that those employers are looking for, taking advantage of all the information that is out there to help create the match. But I would emphasize the connections become, you know, extremely important, and how you build that network at your school and beyond.
Russell, can I just quickly, because this is a very important topic for me, prior to my work at LinkedIn as well. So it's very important that, number one, to highlight any skill that you have on your profile. I mean, I totally agree with Lucy. The network is, I mean, LinkedIn is all about networking and having more connections to, increase your chances of finding better jobs. But highlighting skills is, of course, a priority. But something I've seen from previous work that I've done is, I mean, discrimination isn't just about race or age or like other things. We've seen a lot, especially in the United States, we've seen a lot of discrimination based on unemployment spell. So employers sometimes, especially now that there's a lot of talk that we're heading into a recession, employers can start to get very picky. And if I'm looking at two candidates, somebody has a longer unemployment duration versus somebody who's just recently unemployed, somehow in the back of their minds of an employer, I'm gonna go with the recently unemployed, because they think that the longer you spend out of work, the more likely you're gonna start losing your skills. So it's very important for recent grads and for individuals who are looking for work to make sure you jump to any opportunity, add anything. If it's a volunteer job, if it's an internship, just do anything. Don't leave any unemployment gap on your resume, because that's gonna highlight to employers or to future companies that you're actually doing something useful in this time, and you're not just like sitting home, because that's a key thing that we've seen at least in the previous recession, and we're likely to see it again. So add skills, keep your resume full with anything that you do.
Thank you so much for that.
We have about 5 minutes, so each question we'll give to one panelist each. So.
In that case, my next question is for Lucy. First of all, I'm Michelle Escalona. I'm technology manager at Diageo. but I'm here representing the Latino Hispanic Business Resource Group in the company and the co-chair of this group. Lately, we have a new program in the company to support entrepreneurs in the minority group, female, Black, and Latinos. Something that we are facing recently is one thing that for this entrepreneur to apply, they have to own the company, 51% own. And lately, we noticed on the Latino, they are not fulfilling this condition because what you mentioned, they link into family, friends, and they share all this ownership. How we can break that behavior, how we can help them to find the right support, and in that way they can take advantage of program that we are doing right now.
Great question, right? And a couple of quick things, given we're getting the time check back there. But first and foremost is around having the, how do you define a strategy that allows you to do that, right? I often talk about, that importance of understanding your starting point and where you want to get to. Ultimately, organizations get what you measure, and you incentivize leaders around getting those goals. Some of the types of initiatives that can help in something like this is thinking, how can we allocate, mentor sponsors, and actually hold them accountable, right, for how are they helping those colleagues, right, achieve the numbers, right, that you said. Thinking about the type of capability building programs, it doesn't have to be that your organization provides it, but bring in visibility, because there's increasingly so many more resources that are available, right, that they can, tap into through a local chapter of, for example, Alpha, right? And so thinking holistically about the network of partners that one can tap into and those resources, because so much of this is about expanding the reach of who you're engaging, getting advice from, and who can potentially open that door. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Marcela Chagoya here with United Teachers Los Angeles, and also a board director and representing American Federation of Teachers. Obviously, my question is going to be about education. So my question is, how do your companies, I have two questions, but I'll get to this one first. What are your companies doing, if anything, to promote career and tech training courses within the public education systems, given that because of funding across the nation, those programs have been cut? And we've been talking a lot about skill sets, kind of not replacing, but in addition to four-year colleges. So what are your companies doing?
Oh my goodness. I know that we only have a minute, and I know that Pearson is doing so much more than I can share in a minute. I will just say that we are really working to provide great opportunities across all stages of an individual's journey. No matter if they are young, old, we are really committed to lifelong learning. And I am happy to send you more information afterwards.
Wonderful. And just one more, really quickly.
Oh, we only have 30 seconds.
Oh, I'll let her. Go ahead.
I'll just cut to the chase. The question is, for those who did make it into the space at the table, looking around and they're the first, they can often feel, gratitude to just be in that space. Can you talk about that in terms of like when you have to be your own advocate to get those raises, to get those promotions when they're not exactly landing in your lap, as you may notice with other peers?
Sounds like Lucy.
Wrap it up for us, Lucy.
I will try. Thank you for the question. I think it's really important. We all have a responsibility, I'd like to say, in a way of paying it forward, right? If you have that opportunity to be at the table where decisions are being made, to help make sure that we're solving for those inclusive workplaces, right? That we're helping level the playing field, that we're asking, for example, when we're looking at a slate of candidates, is the slate diverse enough, right? And so I would say I certainly see it as part of my responsibility. And it's not just about my responsibility because I'm a Latina, but it's like good business sense. I see the data, right? Those diverse teams are going to lead to better outcome for my organization. So it is about speaking up. It's about asking for the data so that you can make the best informed decisions, and then how you're advocating for the type of change that gets us to that better, more inclusive workforce that can then deliver the better outcomes for everyone. Thank you.
Letty, Lucy, Ran, give them a round of applause. Thank you for this.